Get the meeting started. So welcome. I want to bring to order the May 8th Public Safety and Civic Facility Task Force meeting. We have a quorum. I don't have a head count here, but we do have a quorum, so the meeting can proceed. One of our first order of business is our meeting minutes from April 22nd. They were posted with agenda materials. Are there any comments or edits for the meeting minutes? Seeing none, the meeting minutes are then approved. Time for public comment. If there's anyone in the public who would like to make comments, please let us know. Either
it won't let me be quiet.
Tell me two public meetings.
the mute button.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on one second. And then if there are people that are online that would like to comment, if you're on Teams and on a phone, push *5 to raise your hand. And if you're in the Teams application, just use the raised hand icon. So Connie would like to comment.
I can't get PPC to be quiet. I wanted to comment there too. Comments are exactly the same moment.
So you're going to give us preference then?
Well, you're going to hear them talking in the men's bathroom.
Okay, all right. So Ms. Marsh, the floor is yours.
Okay, my name is Connie Marsh, and I live on Issaquah, and I've been watching the finances for the city for a very long time, and for many years complained since the Central Issaquah plan that the city was not gathering fees enough to build administrative infrastructure. And so with zero surprise, I find that the city doesn't have enough money to expand its infrastructure through its own decision making. And as much as I shouted to the winds for all that time, I was still surprised to see that we also haven't maintained the buildings that we already have. So as a community member, this whole package make me crazy and entirely unwilling to vote more money to the city if we don't maintain our buildings in a way that we can continue to have them long-term and functioning. And instead, we decide we want to abandon those buildings, tear them down, and build something new. And you want the taxpayers to pay for that, along with the impact fees from a long time ago from Lakeside. I disagree with the decision-making of the city long-term, and I am not willing to give them more money with our already increasing expenses. So I watched the meetings, and I get the sense that, wow, everybody's sort of for this concept. And then I talk to people and they look at me like I'm absolutely crazy that the city thinks that they might go out for a bond and that the people will vote more money. You have 2 consecutive school district bond failures, indicating that the people are tired of just feeding government entities more money. And the people don't see the difference between the city and the school district for the most part, even though they're distinct units. So I would like reality to intrude in the conversation here and think about the history of the city, how responsible it has been with the city tax dollars in its government buildings, and how our lack of maintenance is helping to create this situation. So there you go. I feel like I'm speaking for many of my neighbors and people who I talk to in public. I'm not just one. You can try to make me just one, but I'm not just one. And now I'm going to go try to turn off.
Hey, Ms. Marsh, is there anyone else? See, don't have anyone else in the room? Anybody online raise their hand? No. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda topics for tonight. We have 2 major agenda items. One is an overview of the community survey, and Autumn Monahan will provide that. We're also going to start maneuvering our way into trying to formulate the task force recommendation to the mayor. And if you look through the agenda materials, and we'll speak more to that as we set that one up, there's some kind of significant discussion around the criteria that we've talked about already, but we need to make some choices about what the preferences are of the task force as we start to kind of narrow down a recommendation that would be coming from us at the end of our work. But before we get there, let's do the community survey. I think that's enlightening. So I'll let Autumn take the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we'll be reviewing two surveys tonight. The first is our community survey, which you're actually seeing before the city council sees. It's already out in public and in their agenda, but we got a sneak peek. So you guys are some of the first to check out some of the results. There is a ton of information in the community survey. I pulled out just a few things that I found noteworthy for this group, but there is a lot more to dive into in your packet if you'd like to you really want to get into more of the data. So to start out, the community survey is a survey that we do every other year. It's statistically valid. It is mailed out to random members in our community. And the person, I think, with the first birthday in the household gets to take the survey, I believe. I've never received it. I think it's the first or it's someone's birthday. We received 825 responses, which is a really great response rate for the city of our size. And this map shows where everybody lives that took the survey, just to show that we made sure before we closed the survey that we had enough representation from neighborhoods in the community. So the main overview, a lot has not changed here in the past 2 years. Overall, people are really happy living here. 96% of residents rated Issaquah's quality of life as excellent or good. 95% rated Issaquah as an excellent or good place to live, versus the US average of 49%. So the survey company that we use does surveys throughout the country, and then they look at our responses and compare them to other customers throughout the country. And so that's where that stat came from. And then overall, 92% rated the overall image of the city is positive. So just overall, people are fairly happy. This took me a while to process, and I'll try to explain it in a simple way. But we asked both what's most important as far as main topics to the community, as well as their satisfaction with those topics. And then areas where they found it most important but least satisfaction are the priority areas that you see here. And the number one is flow of traffic on streets in Issaquah. That has not changed since our last two surveys. Next is the next high priority is land use planning and zoning. And then the third is maintenance of city streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. So those are the top three priorities the community is expressing to us. Just of note down there, about middle way is police service. So I was kind of looking out just for what the sentiment is around police in Issaquah. And so about middle way is a priority for folks as far as police service.
Question?
Yeah.
So looking at that, thank you for explaining about it. I was doodling it for a bit.
Yeah.
So, looking at the third item, sequentially, maintenance of city streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure shows that it's important at 28%, but the satisfaction's at 67%. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
67 as a relative scale of score of 67% satisfied with maintenance of infrastructure.
Yes. But the way that they calculate it is they bring both the importance and satisfaction together for that scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for city leadership and services that should receive the most emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years. Oh, yeah.
That police is ranked number 4 on the importance list. So that means it's better than middle.
As far as, yeah, that's true.
Since that's one of our functions, I think that's.
Emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years. The number one was value received for your local tax dollars and fees. So that is definitely top of mind of residents is how far their tax dollars go for what services in the community. Next is quality of local government services. followed by several others. But I definitely wanted to highlight this slide for the fact that the number one over city leadership and service was just value for their local tax dollars. The most preferred ways to access city services. This slide is of interest to me because I also oversee communications. It's amazing to see how much our website has grown as a number one for our community as far as ways that they would like to engage with the city. So by far online, next was then phone, followed then by in person. So those are the top three. I think, and you'll see some results from other survey. I think folks still always want an option of some way to find somebody in person at City Hall, but definitely do want to do a lot of business online or via phone with the city.
Question on the list.
Yeah.
So the in-person, that I'm reading it right, in-person is actually, it's like 1% of was first choice. Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah.
So even though they're made it a choice,
Right. It's like they want it there as an option, but yeah.
Like a fallback.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the population, we talked about less than 10.
Is mail snail mail or email?
Snail mail. Public safety services that should receive most emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years. So number one priority was overall feeling of safety in Issaquah. Next was response to property crime. The third was visibility of police around the city. And then fourth, how quickly police can respond to emergencies. So that was our, again, there's a ton more data. I just pulled a few that were related both to money and police services, just to highlight for you. So I encourage you to continue to look and ask me questions if you have them. We're also going to be doing a much more in-depth presentation to the city council next week. So more to come on that. Now, we also just did an online community or online survey with residents to ask some questions specific to the work that this task force is focused on. So this was online only. We heavily promoted it through all of our communication channel, including social media, our e-news. All of you, I know, reached out and asked your neighbors to fill it out. We've got 268 responses, which is a little less than I think we had 320, I believe, that last time, 2 years ago when we did this. The majority of the respondents were residents, followed then by professional services, businesses, and local organizations. So when asking what services, excluding police, should be provided in person, the number one was just general questions and customer support. Number two was human services, which was interesting last time. That was very low. I think most people who read this thought human services just meant like the city's there as a service. When we're talking about human services, oftentimes that's the folks that are helping those that may be in crisis or that need extra support. So I just found that interesting, and I think that wording was off, where I think most thought human services just meant I need help on something.
Like
Can
HR.
help me. Yeah. Next was permitting, followed by records requests, business licenses, bill and tax payments, and then parks and recreation registration, which we have an online portal for. So I know most go online for that service. And then very little other. So we do know pretty much what folks want to come engage with us on as far as customer service.
Just anecdotally, there was a write-in comment quoting, most services can be provided remotely, which I think is in keeping with what we just saw.
Yeah. So just a couple notes on transportation and space needs. The majority said they would drive to City Hall, followed by walking. I believe there's another slide in here that shows that parking is important to people, that they have a space to park and that they would be driving to City Hall. 60% said they would not be inclined to use public transit to get to city facilities. 75% yes or maybe to utilizing city facilities for an event or meeting. And about 60% said they'd be willing to pay a fee for some kind of community meeting space. So as far as which features you'd most like to see, the number one was restrooms. I was surprised by that. I was like, okay, yeah, that would probably be provided. So restrooms was number one, followed next with parking. The third was adjacency to public park amenities, so outdoor event space, public plazas, green space, access to other public agency or community services, and then indoor event space. Again, a little bit lower as priority was access to transit, followed by art, bike parking, and then EV charging stations. So pretty basic as far as what the needs are, as far as parking, restrooms. I did find it interesting how high the adjacency to park amenities and public spaces folks were. So what type of programming would you or your organization possibly host at a city facility? Community meeting or event was number one, followed by private party or social gathering, and then neighborhood meetings, hands-on workshops, and then business meetings, and then followed by wellness, musical performances, or classroom work. This slide very much reflects what was happening at City Hall back when we had more space. So we used to have the Eagle Room, which is now our permit center, open to the community, as well as the Coho Room, especially in the evening. And just anecdotally from working there and working there a lot of nights, I would see where the space was being used. And it was a lot of HOA meetings. It was the quilting club. It was a lot of community groups. So this definitely reflects what the community would be using those spaces for. All right, almost half of the respondents would look to accommodate 10 to 25 people, followed then by 23% want space for 25 to 50. So when we're thinking about spaces that we would share with, say, office, our day-to-day conference rooms, they're looking for a bit larger of a space. It's not like a space for, 4 people to meet. It's more of a group. Timing, most are looking for using these spaces on evenings, weekends, or are flexible on when the space can be available. And then the frequency, more than half said they'd be using it a few times a year. Just also folks entered kind of who they were representing, and just as a recap, it included HOAs, PTAs, clubs, Kiwanis, Mountaineers, faith-based organizations, tax prep and accounting services, family functions, arts programming, Girl Scouts, music groups, and veterans groups. So it definitely was a varied group. So as the city plans for its future facilities, what is most important? So number one, closely followed by number two. Number one was offering more event space for community and nonprofit organizations, followed by providing in-person city customer support. So again, there is still an interest that there is somebody there at a front counter when I need them. But definitely interest in event space. Coming in third was that community building through placemaking. Where folks would prefer future facilities to be located, the top response was Old Town, followed by near I-90, and then third was the Issaquah Valley area. The Issaquah Highlands was also mentioned several times as an other for that category. And then we asked the question of, do people know that this, that we have police that need more space? And so the question that was asked was, Issaquah Police, which includes patrol, 911 dispatchers, and 72-bed jail, have outgrown their space on East Sunset Way. Since the facility is also shared with City Hall staff, are you aware of these space needs? About half said they were. Which I actually was surprised by, that many people said yes. I think that a lot of folks were driven to our survey through social media, and that's what our post said too. So I don't know if they learned about it like within minutes. So yes, they were aware or not.
Yeah.
Other feedback, and I provided all the responses because there was a lot of just, people could enter in their thoughts at the end of the survey. So I provided all of those. I started to kind of pull out a few quotes and then I was like, this is not fair to everybody. So I just put them all in your packet, but some takeaways, there was concerns with additional taxes. There was other requests for facility upgrades like the senior center. There was some question whether police need to be located or not in Old Town. There was also kind of varied opinions that police would need more space. There was definitely interest in meeting spaces, so a lot of detail around how people would use those community meeting spaces. And then just some plugs for incorporating art. And that's a quick summary.
So any questions or observations about the results from the latest survey data? Anything jump out at you that helps inform our thinking?
Surprises.
Not so much from the statistically valid survey. A lot of those responses are pretty similar to what we've seen in the past. For this online survey, I think the one that was most surprised is that half said they were aware that there was that police needed more space. That question, that one I was surprised by. It's not something we've talked a ton about the community.
You said that the mail survey was statistically valid, right? So that's like about say 800 responses.
825, yep.
And we're like a city of like 40,000, maybe. So that's like 2%, right?
I can look up the percentage rate, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just curious to know how many people and like what counts as statistically valid. And
Yeah.
for the online survey, I think like because it's 200, we might have even skewed the results. Like that might even explain why you have like 50% of people, we're like 20 people right here. So
Very true. There is some details on how it's statistically valid at the very front of the survey. I can send that to you too.
okay.
I know that they want it to a certain number, but then they also want to make sure there's a certain number of residents, in certain neighborhoods, and also looking at things like age. So there's several things they'd like to hit as far as response rate before they close it.
Oh, sorry, Jason.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. I read about 200 pages before I started petering out. The responses were a little bit all over the place, like you said. I saw more people for the police. I saw a few people that were saying, like you said, move them around town. I don't, kind of something that we discussed last time. What I did notice, what I took from it, is like the feature slide points to a city hall meeting place that would be proximately located near public spaces. I think that kind of limits where we're thinking, right? That right off the bat, that puts you either in Old Town or possibly Pickering Mark. Roughly 73% want a 25 to 50% meeting space. There was a very small handful that wanted above 100, which that's pretty remarkable. And then one of the last slides you showed, bottom, was where would you prefer to have it placed? And again, I think 47% said Old Town, 28% near I-90. Again, pointing us to these two options is what I see the most strongest option as far as a new city hall. Like I said, I think that's kind of the hard part for the task force. Where do we want to place this? That's going to open up more of an avenue for us to make decisions that will help the city council and help kind of come up with an idea. But I think that's like first part of the focus is what are we talking about as far as where for our options, because our options are different. One of the slides or one of the presentation slides mentioned property that the city has versus property the city needs to buy. You know, had broken out a bunch of different costs. I think it was like roughly $10 more million to buy the property as well. And then there was obviously the renovation. So I think that's the big thing is where do we want to go? But everything I saw is pointing towards Old Town, pointing towards Pickering Mark, possibly a second avenue. But I think that's where the task force kind of has to go. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking about this. Definitely.
Thank you. April.
For the results in the online survey that surprised you, are you able to mince up those results by demographic? Can you tell us what, what percentage of it were businesses? Because I'd be curious to know.
I'll check.
Yeah,
I don't know if we can.
okay,
Check.
There were some demographic slides.
Yeah.
As far as businesses, residents.
Right.
There's also breaking down by age.
yeah,
There's a lot of.
I'd be curious if it's skewed because the folks that said they were aware that the police have needs might be folks who are just exposed to these conversations already. And I think the police needs argument is something we really need to get the awareness out about. In order for this to work.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, that was helpful. Thanks, Autumn.
Great.
So our next topic is really starting our discussion / deliberation about what are those elements that we think are most important for our recommendation. So it is really starting to put some framework around what we think are the right answers, if you want to call them that, to the question about city facility needs that we want to advance forward. So I'm going to hand it to Autumn to begin setting this up, and then I'm going to take these kind of questions. If you've looked at the slide presentation already, they're questions that kind of tee up the discussion. We'll take those and try to track our way through as much of that tonight as we can. We'll see how this goes. Not necessarily need to get an answer. If we do get to a place where everybody's going like this, then that's great, but let's see where we go. But in any case, let's start with the setup.
Thanks. So as we were kind of talking through the agenda for this meeting, we've dumped a lot of information out to you guys the last 3 meetings. And then started to kind of get into some more details around, is this site viable? We started really getting more into the weeds on some of these options. And we thought it's just good to kind of step back for a second and really think through, like you just heard, what are some of the main goals the task force has? What's that framework look like for decision-making? Hearing you discuss some of these questions tonight will then help us in really framing up some options for you that you can really look at a bit more of the cost, or look at what some of the size of a city hall would look like on a certain property. But I think we need to we're trying to stay a bit higher level tonight to know what those goals are, and then we can come together with some options for you to really, for all of us to really dig in on, if that makes sense. So it was kind of chicken or egg, because I wanted you to know what was out there first, but at the same time, I think we kind of need to pull back and really better understand what the priorities are of this group. So just as a reminder, these were the project goals that the city council set on this project when it was started a couple of years ago: ensuring safety, responsibly stewarding public dollars, providing community accessibility and convenience, supporting economic development, delivering enhanced community amenities, and embodying environmental stewardship. So the discussion this evening we framed up into these topics. The first one is just a discussion with the group on what reaching consensus means. The second is an urgency. So what's the urgency, right, of this work? A location that's preferred for City Hall, what the design should look like for City Hall, and then any other questions or topics that you'd like to cover. So for that, I'll hand it back over to you to kind of facilitate the discussion on consensus.
Sure. Great, thanks. So you can see up on the slide, there's a definition of consensus, and it's going to be important for us, I think, at the front end here to really figure out how are we going to reach decisions as a group. And this is a definition of consensus that I've used before, and it seemed to be pretty effective. But want to make sure that we all kind of see things in a similar way when it comes to making decisions about the recommendation. So I'll read it out loud and then quick discussion about this. But consensus in this group would be: in the absence of unanimous agreement, decisions may be reached when most members of the task force agree on a clear option, and those who may oppose it say they've had a reasonable opportunity to influence the choice and will support the final decision. I think it's important that hopefully we can make a recommendation where we have essentially the task force, the full force of the task force saying we stand behind this recommendation. There's gray areas, obviously, in how supportive we are on any element here. But we want to get to a place where we're all comfortable saying, yes, I'm willing to support the recommendations from the task force. So this definition would be kind of, we come back to this if we get stuck and say, can we get there through this approach? So questions about this, does it make sense? Are there what ifs that you're thinking about that we need to talk about? Seeing none? Okay, well, good. Then we'll use this as the kind of touchstone for how we will achieve agreement on our recommendations or consensus on our recommendations. The other thing I think it's important, I'll just throw one more thought in here. We've received a ton of information already, but there's so much other stuff that has to be sorted out when you're talking about building a project, a new city facility, or whether you're going to lease property or whatever the path, wherever the path takes the city. And we can always be asking for more information. We're going to need to at some point say we've got what we can get at this time. We just have to make our assumptions or our conclusions based on what we've got. There will be opportunities, I think, to ask for more when we kind of move down the road here. And if it's achievable, obviously we want to get as much information that's viable for us to get now. But obviously we have to recognize, I think there's a limit to how much we're going to get in the way of specific information to make our decisions or make our recommendations. So I just thought I would throw that as just another thought here as we start walking down the path of trying to get to decisions, because we can always say, if I only knew this, I would be able to make a wiser choice. Well, we're going to have to make wise choices based on what we've got. So Eric.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that I would like us to get a little bit more information on is the financial aspect of it. Because as we start looking at the options, leasing short-term, long-term, renovating the police station, our financial options may vary depending on what the solution that we recommend is. And so I think it would be helpful to integrate that into our recommendations.
So Laura, you mentioned, I think previously about kind of rough order of magnitude kind of numbers that you could generate for us as we start to kind of narrow down on a site specific.
Yeah, so the cost per square foot based on historic costs of other projects that we would put forward. The tricky part about costs, especially tricky these days, is the cost of time. Right, so I could tell you what it might cost tomorrow to build it. I could not tell you what it's going to cost you in 2 years to build it based on a wrong, right? Without going out and getting an independent cost estimator and having them do their professional opinion about what escalation might be. So that's the tricky part about costing things at this.
Just to clarify, I was talking not only about project costs, but financing.
Financing, yep, totally.
Good question. Anything else before we lean into our first questions? Jason.
I would just say that I think city council has already kind of made some decisions that we don't need to rehash, right? Ultimately, this we go through city council. Their opinion, my understanding, is that the Issaquah Police Department, as it is where they want to keep it. They'd like to utilize the whole space for a renovation, and get City Hall out of there and utilize that space that we already have for the PD. So I don't think it's a question of whether or not the Issaquah Police Department is staying in Old Town. Zach, you can let me know if I'm wrong, but I think that's my understanding of it. So really, we're mostly talking about City Hall. We can talk about the police department, but again, the city council's made it pretty clear that they don't want it in the Highlands. It's not feasible. And we already have a building that still has another 25, 30 years left if it's renovated for them properly. And it sounds like the urgency is really the police giving them the full breadth of their building that they need. And really, the conversation is mainly about City Hall. Don't get me wrong.
And how far the police station. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, unless everyone
tell me if I'm speaking, not speaking on behalf of everyone, unless everyone here disagrees with, keeping the police station where it is, but we've also already talked about like how much it costs to construct a jail nowadays too, and because we have that infrastructure already in place, it just makes sense to stay. So I would say you're correct.
And probably the numbers probably make it financially infeasible to move it. So, yeah.
I don't want to.
Councilmember
We
Holtz.
already had that comment.
You don't want a jail up in the Highlands?
No, just moving it, I think one of the two comments from the surveys kept talking about Highlands. I think we got some people in the Highlands who just feel better if they had police force up there.
Gotcha. So which is a nice segue, I think, into the first discussion questions.
Yeah.
So it is about the urgency. So it is, how quickly should the city address its public safety and police needs? I think most, if not all of us, have had an opportunity to go through the public safety building, kind of see the situation. And so the question is, how long can we wait before we have to act there to give them a facility that meets their needs? So I want to start there. Anybody want to kind of lean in first on that question? Oh, Eric, go ahead.
So ask questions related to that, which is, so how far along are we in the planning process for that work? And I think this is a question I asked a couple of sessions ago. When will we have a ROM on renovating the police station? Because obviously financing that is a factor in how quickly we can get to work on it. And the other piece of that is, where do we put all the administrative staff that we're vacating?
The first, you want me to answer which first you want?
The timing, I think, of when we'll have, and
So-
kind of the process for what you're doing for the PD.
Right, so right now we are working on developing two options for the PD using the entire building. One is maximum reuse, so it's using much of the walls and infrastructure that's there as possible, making a little bit more compromises in terms of that to understand what the lowest possible cost could be. Not including the jail costs. That's just for the PD portions. And then we're developing another one where we're making it as highest and best use of the building as we can to make as few compromises as possible. So pretty much the higher cost that you come to. So we're doing that now. We should be done with that in a couple of weeks to be able to go over with the police department to understand if they're on board with what we're doing and some adjustments to make. And then pretty soon after that, we'll be able to come up with a cost estimate about the renovation costs. So in a few weeks, maybe 3.5, 4 weeks, depending on how quickly we can. But then there was another question associated with his about what are you going to do with people if we were to move them out?
Well, and that's part of this group's discussion.
Yeah.
I think we can hold on that for now. And then the other sub question to this is, what are those factors that support kind of urgency to take action? So, Chris.
So maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I'm going to the cost comparisons table, which has the 3 different scenarios. And I guess it'd be interesting to see scenario 0, which is stay the way we are, which we don't think we can for various reasons. It doesn't give our police what they need and busting at the seams there. But if there's public sentiment to not spend any more money, that's what we're forced to be. What does that look like? Can we afford that? What's that cost? And continue the way we are.
The no action
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, I would suggest as part of that, it's not just the dollar value, but what are the implications for operations, safety, et cetera?
I think it's important to know.
Yeah.
As one individual, I might vote in favor of a bond, but if there's an anti-government spending sentiment that's going on right now, and I have to know what we would do if nothing passes.
I think that's going to be part of the sales of if a bond is correct. Mary Ann?
Yeah, to this point, I think like no action could also be, could we break up the city hall, put it in existing buildings, elements of it. Could be the no action type of thing, just to mitigate not having cost.
even that would come with cost, but it's the minimum, bare
Yeah.
minimum.
It could be an MVP in the budget. Yeah.
April.
Lori, I'm just spitballing here, but are there any metrics on or ways to qualify the cost of doing nothing, in recruiting, retention,
It's a fantastic.
safety, efficiency of operations, especially in a growing city with more dynamic issues like homelessness? I'm curious if there's some actual thought leadership on that.
Nothing other than, I mean, there's some studies out there that are like based on questioning a police station of 12 people, right? I mean, there's some very small studies out there, but there's nothing that is just quantifiable. This is what's going to happen.
I don't want to start a big conversation here, but I think about how traffic is such an issue. And I wasn't here for it, but I've heard there were opportunities to do things years ago, and now we have a massive issue. So that was the cost of doing that, traffic nightmare. That's right. So in that light, the cost of doing it.
Yeah, well, real quick, chime in too. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. The doing nothing option is in play. And so little by little, every day goes by and the impacts of that continue to build. So when I'm thinking about urgency, the question, what's driving a need to move is, going through the building, there's the safety of the police officers in the building. It's not, doesn't have the kind of the standard of security that you would typically find in a building like that. You're mixing, the public in some areas with police activities. The size of the building doesn't meet their needs for storage and access, efficient access to equipment. There's a whole number of things that are driving, in my mind, a need to move relatively quickly on that question about addressing the police department needs and providing adequate and functional and safe space for them and the public to operate in, as well as the people who are incarcerated they're dealing with in the building. So, it is, I just my personal reaction after walking through that building school, boy, I'm glad I don't work in there. That's just not a good facility or environment to actually be. And I know they spend a lot of time out on the road, but they're spending time in the office doing work and meeting and things. And they're just trying to make the best of what they've got, which I totally admire, but they need help.
Well, to be fair, only a small percentage of them spend time on the road. The rest of them work in the building most of the time.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think the doing nothing option is not going on. The only question is, what steps can be taken? Because I have a pretty strong feeling that given the current tax environment that we're all experiencing from the state and county, and the recent failures of what I thought were relatively large school bond. I know our school bond guy's not here, so.
Go for it, go for it.
They were shockingly large, and I wasn't surprised that they failed.
Yeah.
And so I'm reasonably certain that any bond measure that we eventually put forward is probably going to have that same thing, at least for a number of years, right? And so then, isn't a more appropriate course of action is to say, well, what can we do with what we have? Right? It's a suboptimal solution, but these suboptimal solutions have been piling up for decades, and now they're just right in front of us. We have one person who's taken the time out of the day to come out and say exactly that same thing, right? That people are not going to be giving them, and financing, 50, 60, $70 million worth of new city hall and other renovations is probably going to fall on deaf ears. So is there something that you can do within the current operating budget to give the police back their space? Do minimal amount of reno just to give them within the space they get back to make it more functional for the needs that they have. And then also figure out what to do with the people that make up the government that was in that building, right? Is it lease based? Is it, you know, is there any more old apartment buildings that are for sale? In Petersburg, but the office space relatively inexpensively. And like I said, I think that the financing thing is just gonna fall into place. I'm a taxpayer in this city, in this county, this state. And I paid my property taxes last week. It's a lot higher than I paid. Right, and it's gonna be a lot higher next year. It's gonna be a lot higher. So, and unfortunately, the city doesn't get any of that money, which is another appalling revelation after this task force. So,
We're going to spend just a couple more minutes on this one because we've got some other questions when we get to it. This is helpful. I think we're all going to be in the what's the solution mode. We're trying to just on these specific topic areas figure out, you know, is there
the solution mode is, you know, using all terms where I used to work at t-shirt sites, right? It's a small t-shirt, it's a medium t-shirt, it's a large t-shirt. And I'm much more, I think a small t-shirt is going to be a much more attainable goal, right?
And I think that's one of the options that Lori is looking at is
I think
what's the minimum we can do with the
Let's
space?
see less than the minimum, right? I live on a fixed income, I have to take care of my house, we have to make money. So there's got to be some level of compromise. And that was kind of the point of these task forces, to be creative, right? This is us come up with it. And if we, as much as I would like the idea of a big, nice, new civic center, city hall down here in Old Town with all these cool amenities and parking and stuff, it's financially, I don't think it's feasible at this juncture. in time. Now, in 5 years, we can take change. That's all.
So if I could redirect the conversation just a little bit, it's a great conversation. There is kind of a fundamental question here about, do you as a group that has toured the police building feel that there is urgency to address that need?
Yes.
Right, that's the kind of the focus
Yes, there
and
is
why?
urgency.
What did you see that made it, right? Because what we do about that, right, sure, we can be very creative. But if nobody believes that that is actually an urgent issue, then we can wait 5 years to address it. Right. So we want to make sure that we answer this question.
But we the urgency is there, I believe that most of the people leave this table up early, that crazy after taking that.
so, right. So real quick for those that want to hear from folks we haven't heard from yet, first, Jonathan.
I think the factor that supports urgency is the safety in the building and the public. So it's a safety concern.
Others that haven't had a chance to weigh in, have a thought here? Or a nod that yes, we think it's urgent, or no, not that big a deal.
I saw several.
You saw a nod.
Yes. I think we might have
I
consensus.
think so. Carolyn, real quick, then back in.
Other factors after having done the tour is lack of functionality, like privacy, basic privacy of the locker room, people on top of each other. The flow of it is not leading to efficiency, effectiveness, the emergency staff. It doesn't work well in the number of people and the space and the functions and needs to be fixed.
Well said. I think we do have, oh, sorry, Jason.
I was just gonna add, the one thing for urgency was retention. That's the one thing I haven't heard. So retention is a big one. We've got a great police force. We want police officers that are familiar with the community that they serve. We want them to come here, spend 20 years with us, retire. So again, retention would just be the other thing I would add to the other task force members' comments. So,
Great, thanks, Jason. So let's jump to I think we do have, my sense is everybody's that's walked through that building says, got to do something about this. Okay, so next question is really a discussion about the location, and we saw information or provided information about locations around the city. We have information from the surveys that try to inform us on a location, but let's have a discussion here about where we think City Hall services should be located. So Old Town or in central Issaquah seem to be the two kind of areas that have opportunity. Eric?
It seems like there's a subset of that question, which is, are we going to separate a front desk from all of the other administrative services that did not show up in the survey as being important to have in person? So there may be multiple locations that we consider.
Yeah.
And we posed this question, say services meaning customer service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, then you can ignore what I just said.
Oh, no.
Because we're gonna
But
get-
I thought about that too.
we're gonna
Some of
get
these
there.
are really hard to uncouple, right? Because they're all so intertwined.
Yeah.
But if we're thinking about where we focus service for the community, that in-person service or having that desk. Whatever it looks like, however big it is.
We had 47% of respondents saying Old Town. It's significant.
Would this include community meeting space or is that a separate issue?
Yeah,
Oh, it would be.
yeah, this is services to the community versus like office space for staff, right? If we are dividing those or not.
Oh, sorry.
I would vote for Old Town, that then we're walking around the area, the senior center, like in the city hall building across the street, it's gonna get ripped down, the duplex, the community center. I think keeping it all close, central is very efficient and makes sense to people visiting, looking for services. So I would vote for Old Town.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I were driving around every you and Aaron and keeping her informed of what we do. She's looking at the locations in Old Town. That's one place that makes any sense for her and me as well. So I don't think Pickering is considered central, is it? So,
Yes.
Is it? Well, I'd much prefer Old Town over Pickering. My wife and as an example, my wife and taking away that big field that we're not. Why would you want to do that? Just, and I've heard from other residents of similar kind of sentiments. They would rather see everything together. And not spread out too much.
Not to reach further for what,
I'm sure.
but I actually think central Issaquah makes more sense because the parking is just so condensed right there.
She would invite you
Yeah, and then you're talking about front and Newport, I mean, it just seems like, why not try to siphon some of that away from or locate it in different area? I just think that we have that area.
Others with thoughts about preference on location. Jason?
I'm gonna go with the contiguous campus. I think that makes the most sense. One of the comments in the feedback said it really well. It just anchors the whole downtown. It's where we have a lot of different facilities, where we have a lot of different amenities. It makes the most sense to me. As someone who lives in Old Town, I can assure you this is, it's coming from a honest place. I'm very aware of the traffic. I live down on Front Street, but it makes the most sense for the city. And I don't know, I mean, I'm clearly not a parking expert, but most of our city services are already down. So they're already parking. And it doesn't mean there's not gonna have growth in 20 years, as Lori pointed out 2 meetings ago. But I mean, if we can be creative enough to come up with a campus idea, again, you have a senior center that is on its last leg as far as how much life that building has. I forget the term we used last time we were here, tired. That kind of makes the most sense to me. Again, a contiguous campus where it anchors the Old Town. You have people coming for multiple reasons, staying there, checking out all the things that Old Town has to offer. It's a lot of, other than the actual nature of Issaquah, it's probably what you hear most people coming here for. Oh, that beautiful historic downtown. I mean, I hear that along with the Alps. There's reasons people come.
Jonathan?
I think, thinking central is Issaquah, the core, because I think where all the population growth will be. It's just gonna be high density housing through there and will be easiest access, people from islands as well as that road there, so it's more central to the city itself, so people can access it. So it's central. Issaquah.
Okay. It's your first, so April.
I'm just gonna vote for Old Town. Anchoring and just city image related comments. If I had my way, I want my city clerk down there.
Be good to hear from everybody on this one. I think this is an important. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Hi, I'm on, yes, yeah. I'm still pretty undecided, but one of the things that draws me to the central Issaquah part is the extension of the light rail. I think some gentleman mentioned the expansion part of it. That to me would be a nice place to have, but I'm still concerned that, you know, some of the other stuff is gonna be someone else and not do it. But if I had to pick and vote, I'd probably choose the central Issaquah.
Andrew.
Well, I think everybody has very valid points. There's one way or the other, but I think it just boils down to a small shirt sizing, what's most easy, and what's realistic. So boiling it down to what an area will truly be able to support the city hall location is really all it kind of boils down to. And what you're saying, light rail, it sounds great, but so there's funds, but public transit, much importance to that. City.
Chris.
Yeah, I think I was on the same lines as Andrew. My heart, Old Town sounds great. It does. You know, it gives you that campus and all that. But if we find an option, and I think we ought to explore option, if we find something that's $1 million less or $5 million less in somewhere in central Issaquah, we have to pursue that. Look at it. And so I think it's finance driven.
Eric.
Along those same lines, downtown Issaquah, Old Town will require demolition and possibly use of parcels that the city doesn't currently own, and or demolition of the senior center, which adds cost because we've got to rebuild that as well. The advantage to Pickering, which I'm not advocating for, I'm just trying to, get a better handle on cost. But with Pickering, you've got land, you don't have to demolish anything. And it seems more feasible, given the amount of space there, that you could have all of the administrative offices with the community services, public facing services, for a lower cost than having to lease space elsewhere outside of Old Town because there isn't enough space there to do everything. So I think you're right. I would agree that cost has got to be a factor here.
So I'll throw my 2 cents in on this one too. I think my lean would be in Old Town. I think because of what it offers is this connectivity between a number of different community functions. You've got the community center there. There's a public trail that runs through there, the Rainier Trail. You have the senior center. You have the public safety building that's there. I think it creates more opportunities for creating that connectivity and then potentially more solution opportunities because you've got more chips in the game, so to speak, by doing that. Yes, there are costs, but if you kick in the senior center, maybe there's another stream of revenue that can be generated by, including a senior center or another community center as part of a package. That would be my lean, recognizing that this is just one question. There are a number of others that won't influence the end result here. So we're not gonna, I can tell this one, we don't have consensus on. We're not there on this. But end of the day, I think there will be more, I think, discussion that will focus in kind of a location or preference in a second, maybe a primary and a secondary, who knows how this goes. But my lean would really be, creating this kind of community space, connected community space in Old Town. Okay, let's try another one. We're gonna do one more question. I think we're gonna take a little break after that, just to stretch our legs. It's like 2 hours, and I think we've been plowing through this for the last few meetings, and we start losing steam, but even if we stretch our legs, we'll get going. So should the city focus on utilizing its own property? And there were cost estimates that were provided earlier as a key element of our decision-making, or remember we talked about in our last meeting, there's limited opportunities, at least currently in the market, to go buy properties, but should we really leverage the money of the properties that the city already has control over versus a recommendation that says, go find a piece of property somewhere to try to build a building or meet the city's needs? So thoughts on, should we give preference to city-controlled properties? And here's some more back. You want to talk through that?
Yeah, so, all the data from when we, did a similar exercise with the council. So these numbers are old, but just to provide you some perspective, just to kind of frame this discussion. So you can see, and I don't worry too much about the growth scenarios of growth, hybrid, or minimal, but instead more focus on building new with city property or buying property. You can see the cost difference that jumps up on each of these scenarios when we're looking to buy property versus utilizing something the city already owns. Then we've also done an estimate of buying and renovating property, which that number is surely on a, and then cost estimates for leasing. So just to give you a framework, there was a question around like just back of the napkin, what does it look like? And so this just provided this just as a data point, that it will be significantly more if we're purchasing property versus leveraging what we already have.
Just questions, that last slide. I would assume that you would have got a better deal for leasing longer. That looks horrible. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is Pickering Barn, that is city property?
Yes.
And just a question of clarification, those numbers did not include the IPD bill.
No, this is just City Hall.
So the question, should we lean more toward solutions or recommendations that include currently owned properties by the city?
Well, again, in the old town scenario, yes. The only available property in the old town are the one that we have. More or less, I mean. Yeah. They had each store, it has an annexation to the current city hall address. About the catching it. Making that lot, making that contiguous lot, taking up the whole space up. That's just. So I think yes, sticking with the properties that we own, which also includes Pickering. Right? So yes.
Any other thoughts on this or agreement or disagreement with that? Carolyn?
Yeah, I agree with Galen, and I think this is one of the easiest questions to answer. It's gonna be cheaper and faster using city-owned property. And they do have some potential sites. They're gonna demolish that city hall south. There's a spot right there, the duplex. That's gonna be pulled down anyway. So I think that's pretty straightforward.
So those two properties can be compared to be.
So they are big.
But you know.
They'll have to be efficient. We just
Within
don't
the
look to,
stuff.
yeah,
Well, we got the 3 stories.
yeah.
They've already kind of laid that out. Down there, they laid that out for 3 stories. But again, that whole, in my, the issue with parking still is there. Because that's just a building, it's not a parking. That adds a cost. And one of the key takeaways I took from the tour of the police station is they do not have. It's done. And any recommendation, I think, that when it comes down to spending money versus doing, page and go things with like moving pieces around. And not going for kind of other additional funding streams. That should include an impact lot.
Right, and so again, that would be, we would use your recommendation then was, we would find city property for that particular
Right.
function, along with everything else.
So,
So,
so I'm saying is that if we. The impound lot thing was something that, there's a lot of storage he's got that. Depending on who you talk to in the tour, maybe that was, I know when we went, it's very, very clear.
right, yeah,
Right.
yeah, we got that.
The
Yeah, I
sheer number of firearms they have to store and maintain. The vehicles they have to store and maintain, the evidence they have to store and maintain.
Right, so that's one of the needs that we're trying to address. I guess the question that we're responding to, which I think you did a nice job responding from your point of view is, should we emphasize the use of city property, currently held city properties to meet that need along with the others that we've talked about? So Jonathan.
I think the city-owned properties in Old Town are too small. And prime location I'm thinking now is duplexes in existing town hall. That seems too small. I walked around here this last. I think we should be open to buying property in central physical area. There's some really dilapidated vacant businesses that can be just wiped off the map. Example is that Chinese restaurant is tucked in behind that.
It's adjacent to WeWork.
Yeah. It's just a lot of it's that's fact. It's crazy to just wipe that out.
Yeah, I don't think that's, nothing's off the table here. The question is, what's the preference as we're trying to lean into a recommendation? So is the preference to try to use the city's properties that are currently under city control versus that? So do we want to say, well, we don't want to use city properties, we want to go out and
So the preference would be to use what we have. That would be my preference. If we have that, doesn't feel like what we have
it's going to work? Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's good clarification. Okay, there's somebody else out there.
Do you think even the Central would work? A big green barn?
I don't want to do that because I feel like that is purposeful. Open space. Then, yeah.
Jason?
Yeah, I would agree with the question. Yeah, should the city focus on utilizing its own property? Yes. I think that's kind of the only thing I would say is, as far as how we use it is, we have properties that, again, we have to kind of phase it, which is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But in my mind, Issaquah is an affluent city. I mean, what type of city hall do you want to see in 50 years? One that's piecemeal throughout the city. I just saw a picture today of Salt Lake City Hall. It's gorgeous. And I'm not saying we have to build that. Again, it should be kind of reflective of our city, but this town is affluent. And if we have to tuck our city hall in the back 40, no one can find it, it's off the map, that also doesn't make sense. The city does have a lot of money. I'm not saying as far as revenue, but like I said, for an affluent city to hide your city hall somewhere in the city, that doesn't make a lot of sense either.
Maybe should we be rephrasing this question a little bit? I feel like it's almost like asking, should we be spending lesser money, right? Like, I think we all agree that we should be spending lesser money. We would love to use our own property, but can we? I guess same thing. Like, can we get away with like using our existing property because without compromising other stuff? So. Yeah, wherever possible, we would like to do it, but I think the questions should be other stuff on property, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of, I'll start, Jason. So I'll just weigh into and similar thinking, and really the way I would characterize it is really maximize the opportunities provided by properties currently under the city's control. But that may not be the only, you may not be able to get away with just using city-owned property. It might be more than that, but really that's the starting place. And then see where we go from there, because it gets way more complicated. And I think, Carolyn, your point about it's more expensive and more time consuming to go out and buy property and try to do this. I mean, this just adds to the clock and it adds to the budget. So really for me, it's really maximizing those opportunities and see where that gets us. And then you know, maybe there's buying adjacent land, maybe it's buying a piece of property by, you know. Anybody else have a,
Well, maybe that's the distinction of where consensus is here, is like, should the city maximize utilizing so, which is almost kind of a different question than just focusing on that. So and it seems like from the discussions we've had, that we have consensus at least around that. Maximize our own space first, if we can. Sorry.
yeah, I see a lot of nodding heads, so.
So good.
All right, that means we should take a break. Okay, let's take this. For the summer. Okay, so let's take 5 really quick. Just stretch your legs. I need to refill my water, come back, and then we'll head to the next questions. And there are snacks today too, which thanks.
Some new snacks.
New and improved. New and improved snacks.
No, they, we will send it. Also.
Okay, so the next question in front of us is related to something that Eric mentioned earlier. And it's regarding the counter service and where it should be located. Remember, there was some discussion about, do you create a centralized, public service or public counter in some location, but staff are located elsewhere, for example. So this is a question about, should the counter be located, consolidated with, staff all together and public service counters all in one location? Or are we okay with a recommendation that says, no, you can have a separate lock-up window somewhere in the city that, people can go get what they need from a customer service standpoint and everybody else be somewhere else? That's my summary.
A few other points too. There was some question around, do we have any information about how much intersection happens between city staff and the community? Yeah. So we did some of that work because council asked the same thing in 2022. And average is about 6 to 7 walk-ins per day for customer service. That included the permit center, police, utility billing, customers that wanted to go to municipal court but went to the wrong building, and then just miscellaneous. That also includes about, and this may be a little high, but maybe there's about 10 visitors to the executive office. They're just coming for meetings with staff. And this does not include the parks and community services service. So we also, our space planning includes having our parks admin, so our park planners and a lot of the other staff that may or not on the recreation side join us at City Hall. And we've not really assessed how much that is, but there is some engagement with consultants or with other community members. Generally 6 to 7, maybe close to 10. I did ask our front counter if this kind of remains, and they've been tracking this amazingly. Who's been coming to the front counter since? So I just saw this information today. So I can share that with the group in email. It wasn't in time for this packet, but a lot of it still aligns. We were surprised by how many customers are actually PD related or the courts, again, being confused and going to the other building. So we do a lot of the redirect at the front counter, but that's typically the same amount. So that hasn't changed over years. So there's a little bit of just more intel on who the customers are. We do have a lot of office staff that don't have day-to-day interactions with the community. But there are some, like the executive office, that do have a lot of meetings that people are coming to visit them at. That helps.
I'll say I didn't see who went first, so I'm going to start with Chris, and I'm going to work my way this way. Okay.
I think that the customer service counter and the staff absolutely need to be essential. The means of accessibility, and I love being able to do things with Zoom and Teams and remote websites. Often they just go down to where you really just need to find.
My question is on the PD front counter. I don't think it should be in the same place as the other customers. That's why it tends to, because they are currently going, but I don't think that should be moving forward.
Yeah, I kind of wanted some clarity about the customer service counter, what services they provide, because also that the follow-up question to that is how much interaction do they need? Can they answer the question right then and there? Or how much interaction do they actually need to get somebody to get the problem? So this kind of wanted to kind of like day in the life.
Yeah. So for the permit center, there are some walk-ups for permit, but there's also those that schedule ahead of time, come check in at the front counter, and then someone from our permit center will come find them and provide that in-person service. So I'd say that's probably the most, in-person service. Next would be utility billing. We still have some customers that prefer to pay their bill in person. PD, right now, our counter downstairs is not open all the time. And so folks are coming upstairs to the front counter and asking for PD service, typically right away and in person. And then executive office, that is mostly just for meetings. That's for direct access to staff. And then parks and community services, I don't know as much about that one. I could do some more discussion with our parks team, but I do know they have meetings at times.
Because it's interesting, if people asked about the customer service, do you want to survey service? That was phrased in the survey. I'm not sure when I entered it, that I knew all the services that would be coming from a customer service. I would have thought it would be permits and utilities for sure, but the other stuff wouldn't be the executive office. I wouldn't think parks and community service or.
There's also some, and this may be harder to share easily with you, but in looking at some of the notes from our front counter as they've logged who, some of it is just like, I have a question about a pet license and I just decided to come in and I don't know if you provide it or not, but help me figure it out. So I think just again, anecdotally of working on the main floor and hearing a lot of those questions, a lot of times people just come up with asking questions about services we may not provide or asking for those resources. So there is that level of service too. Yeah.
Eric, do we have a sense from a staff perspective of potential downsides of separating service counter from staff office?
I haven't asked that question. Yeah.
I mean, it's important to look at what that does to the public, but, you know, the people who are there every day, if it creates sort of gross inefficiencies, that would sway my decision.
Again, cost permitting, I would ideally like everybody to be together. That's kind of would be nice for everybody to work together. But if it means if it becomes more expensive, then I don't mind the two being separated. But what kind of, again, police services would they be servicing there? Like, are we talking about people who, I don't know, or feel threatened? Would they come in and just walk into? I don't think that's very intuitive for me. Are those also being serviced by City Hall front desks?
It's complicated now just because we are combined. So yeah, so this question's more about like the city hall services, but to answer your question about PD, there's some licenses that are issued to community members that walk up. There's record requests, so there's a lot of records, like if you get into a car accident or whatever those things are, reporting a crime, or people do, you know, show up who are in crisis. So it's, or jail visits, there's all sorts of other customer touches specific to PD that are in person. But for City Hall, this is about the staff, and then just, yeah, the randoms that may show up.
Yeah, go ahead.
They should absolutely be co-located. I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think that the only reason they would be uncoupled, or that does make sense, is if we had to go for that extreme option of having just a customer service desk as our city facing space. And then we had to explore some other options where folks are working from home, possibly leasing space. I don't like that option, but I think that's the only scenario to me where detaching the functions would make it, otherwise it's two buildings.
You do that for cost.
Yeah, I don't like that scenario, but that's the only one that makes sense. Otherwise, it's two buildings, it's two spaces, and nothing, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to do that. Unless someday we wanted to expand in another one. But yeah, that's where my head goes when I think about these things that are.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, just to be clear, I think that PD customer service is in a completely different space than City Hall customer service.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure that somebody you said that you have. Yeah.
No, I'm really focused on I think the police conversation pretty well. We know we need to fix it. We just have to figure out another plan for the city staff.
Okay.
And Lori, you're looking at that front desk for the PD to be in the PD building.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. I'll throw my 2 cents in. So I agree. I think the PD, police department's customer service window is a very different animal than the general services provided by the city. And there's some sensitivity to some of the customers that are visiting the police department. I think that having it separate is not the optimum. There's lots of inefficiencies that get created by that. Customers, like Autumn is saying, they're asking general questions about city functions or non-city functions. Saying that the people that are there need to understand a whole range of different things that the city does or doesn't do to be actually to effectively help the person that's standing in front of them. If they don't have people behind them to back them up, if they need some help with something, that's challenging for them. Just staffing it would be hard, as it adds, some challenges to have the people with the bandwidth and the knowledge to do that. And a lot of people are coming into the city and they want to see somebody. And if they come into a customer service counter that's kind of independent of the city staff offices, they don't have the option to say, hang on, I'll give them a call, see if they're available, and come out and talk to me. So there's a lot of, I think, inefficiencies and kind of impacts the customer service experience too if you have it separate. So I would lean toward definitely consolidate the rest of city staff. Jason?
Yeah, I need sure, and I think they absolutely make sense being together. I don't really see a world where they wouldn't be. I know I keep hearing the word cost, but there's a lot of hidden costs that we might not get in the building costs, 10 years down the road, when all of a sudden now this small community customer facing thing, now you have a small support staff that's working over here trying to get records, servers, all this other thing. Again, we're talking about building a city hall that will hopefully last 50 years. And so I know there's the initial building costs, but there's also hidden unmitigated costs that need to also be thought of. Because again, this stuff will also take time and money to support.
Okay. Eric?
I think phasing here is important to factor into. I mean, I think if we all agree that we need to move as quickly as we can with the police department renovations, that means that we've got to get the administrative staff out of that building quickly. And to me, the only solution to that makes any sense in terms of timing is to do some sort of short-term lease within a building that we may not own, city may not. But ideally, that would be a short-term lease and we'd be able to construct a city hall that would incorporate it. To Jason's point, we are an affluent city. The atmosphere now, in terms of going out for bond funding, is not ideal, but the resources are there. We have to figure out how to finesse that.
So I think we have consensus on this one. The preference obviously is consolidated with the administrative staff. Okay, so let's move to the next one, kind of stepping back again, bigger picture questions here. And this is about kind of this notion of a civic campus or kind of a standalone solution. So I think that we already talked a little bit about this. A civic campus is really the only true civic campus that's in the picture is really the Old Town solution versus. So, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit already, but let's just put the question back out there again. And it is about kind of a civic campus versus kind of a standalone solution. April.
Oh, do you want us to think about these in an aspirational way and how we want to imagine our city? Or do you want us to put on our realist cap and start problem solving for what we know is coming?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's kind of both. It's kind of like the preference would be this.
Yeah.
An alternative would be here's
Okay.
this and here's the implications. Is maybe a way to characterize this on this. If that doesn't make sense, we can try something else. Let's try that. So we can be obviously aspirational. I think we don't want to take anything off the table, but we need to have a realistic lens on it as well as we think through the solutions or the answers to these questions. And if the question falls flat on its face, we'll just move on to the next one.
Although aspirationally, yes, I think we should have a civic campus, these co-located services. I think there's an image of the city. There's an affluence here. I think there are things we should have and things we rely on and enjoy and what makes being in Issaquah so valuable. So yeah, we should have a Civic campus where we get a lot of needs met. And yeah, I would love it to be downtown, that adjacent to public spaces. So 100% totally on board with that. And then how important is the additional community meeting space? I think we've established that. We have a lot of groups and functions and HOAs that can use those spaces and otherwise wouldn't have anywhere to meet. So yeah, I think we can fulfill our civic duty with those meeting spaces. So yeah, they're all very important.
Galen.
Okay, so the little bit foggy on exactly what a city campus is. And I think given what I think a civic campus would be, doesn't fit within the space that we have available. So that's just my take on it. It's going to offer more co-located things than we have space legitimately. So I'm a little bit foggy on that. Should it be adjacent to public open space? Well, ideally, in our survey, it's so indicated, so the people in the city, to the point that that's statistically relevant, agree that it should be located next to open space. And of course, the same survey said people want to have community meeting spaces available too, so that would be a yes.
Yeah.
So just on the community meeting space, so the building will be designed to have obviously conference rooms for staff, right? For staff meetings, for council chambers, everything. So and then what Lori presented also had some additional spaces that were more like specifically added to be community space, right? So this is a little bit of a question about, should we go above and beyond to add space to make City Hall bigger, to add these spaces? Or is there a level of use what is needed for staff only?
So,
Yeah.
so I think on this question, on these three questions, let's just take them all together because it sounds like that people are thinking about it together. So let's do that. So,
I
Mary,
think what I really was on in on this, because of what you know, on head is that people have said that the importance is community space. And I think, you know, I'm skipping ahead, that like, how can we sell this to the public? They're not gonna feel the need. There's not what's in it for me as much as we need to make sure our administrative staff, but they are gonna see that like, hey, there's a room that you can use for your knitting club, your HOA, your whatever. People have really variety of things that they want to use it for. We're gonna really hit home and they're gonna say, oh, this is gonna be lovely. I can have a family picnic there or whatever event they have in their mind. I think it's just an easier selling point. As for additional.
Jason.
I think you already heard pretty clearly from me. I think the Civic campus idea is a better idea located elsewhere. I think what's interesting about Issaquah is part of the charm is that you don't have everything in one building, right? You've got City Hall over here, IPD over here, you've got the senior center. Maybe that other building, I'm thinking of, what is that, the old post office? Maybe that's a city property, or the garage. Maybe that gets turned into our community meeting space. All of those are connected to the outdoor space, which the survey clearly said people want next to their, just going off what the community said, and it's a small fraction, it's a sample, it's a statistical sample. But just going on what they say, they would like it. They want all those outdoor amenities. You already have it. And you have a lot of city properties already there. So I'm definitely leaning toward the Civic campus life. Again, part of the charm could be that it's not a big glass building like Bellevue. You know, Bellevue's very different. So part of the charm is, oh, you want to go, okay, well, it's a quarter mile that way for that building. And maybe there's Wayfair signs that say, hey, this is the HOA, this is the knitting room. That's the senior center. That's City Hall. There's PD, but it's all within, you know, a square mile. And that would create a campus, kind of like the quad in You got
That's a definition I can understand, because if you go down first slash right here, look at, the food bank, the clothing bank, the community center, right, the pool, all those things
Yeah,
are
exactly.
in that line going from basically IPD acres to here. And then the pool acres to the farm.
And then you've got the Memorial Park, you've got the community center where the bands play. And to your point, the pool. So again, that's my idea of campus. It's more like a college campus. It's not like Bellevue City Hall campus where it's all in a big class building. So
That was my definition. I was thinking the big grandiose building, you know.
I think you could do that in Pickering if you were gonna do it with the old town. I think, like I said, that could be part of the charm.
But now, so let's just review about the property we have. I own it. We're not moving things to this big building. That we're located.
Like I said, with great Blair Press signs, it could be a fun day at City Hall, you know, walking around Old Town, getting karaoke, walking over to the pool.
We need more food trucks.
Okay, we're on a tangent now. Okay. Back in here. So really the question around adjacencies and then creating community meeting space. So other thoughts on these questions? Kind of not only the aspirational, but the kind of the realistic world as well.
I agree with the other comments and having Old Town, that civic campus feel. I think we've got great potential there. All the public open spaces are there. And having lived in Bellevue for 20 years and having spent a lot of time at that big glass building, I can tell you it's a very efficient, busy space, community space, city council that used to have classes, used to put some workshops. I spent a lot of time in that building and it functions extremely well. It's huge, but it's very busy and it's well used and it's beautiful.
I don't know, City Hall.
Really.
We're talking about a different scale, but maybe a similar objective, right? I'm sorry, John.
I don't think you necessarily need to have a campus. I'd be happy with this rectangular building and that provides administrative office space and meeting spaces. It's a very efficient square rectangular building sitting out in the parking lot so people can get to it. I think our Old Town is just too congested right now. It's too small. Just need something that's super efficient. Make it smaller, right size for something that's modern. It's got all the functions of a normal administration building.
So your preference is the adjacencies aren't the adjacency to common open space or, okay, good. Other thoughts?
I would probably second that. Very similar to what I was thinking. There might be times when I'm actually, going to the city hall or something, but it's usually I need something done. So I probably would prioritize functionality and even in the survey, a lot of people are frustrated with the traffic. So I would prefer being able to get in and out, park my car, go in, have an efficient system and out. And that's when I would come back home and be like, okay, I'm so glad I live here. It's, super efficient. People love the website, efficiency in some of these things. Might not matter. I would love to have a campus and do all of that, but if it's going to mean that it's going to add another 30 minutes to be, transit in and out.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be clear, the kind of ideas that Jason and I were talking about, it's not we're gonna build it. We're just going to turn what we have, by using the spaces that we have, it would effectively become a campus, just like the Microsoft campus would be. There's building 30, 31, 33, 41. They form their own little areas, but yet Microsoft has recently got into a lot of trouble, like there's some new production block on the right, and then using those campuses. So that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about building the east. We're not talking about building the glass rectangle with all the services, right? And we already have the community center, we have the pool, we have the food bank, the clothing bank. All that stuff is at the south of, the Rainier birthplace. You know, and then IPD is at the north end, and then behind IPD is the park on the senior center. And then continuing down north, we have, you know, the depot, the railway, and then you end up, said something else. Yeah, too.
Yeah, there you go.
The gas station.
So you got the gas station.
Gas station. Yeah, there you go. Interesting.
So April, were you? Thoughts? So I'm definitely like the idea of trying to, back to the earlier conversation we had about leveraging the city's properties and the city facilities to really create a, you know, connected community spaces or functions. So we've already got a lot of that happening in Old Town. Galen and Jason talked a little bit about that. That would be my lean, obviously less expensive and maybe more efficient just from a service standpoint, if that's all your, if that's your focus. But if you're thinking about it from a broader kind of a community place, you know, where more is going on there than just the city hall function. You have people that may be there for city hall functions, but they're there for other reasons. It could be an open connection to a park and open space. It could be a plaza where there's some sort of a celebration going on. It's connectivity to the trails. Those sorts of things actually create an image for the city. I think that's really important when you think about public facilities. And, you know, you're talking about Bellevue's City Hall as an example, and it left an impression. These buildings, city buildings, leave a positive or negative impression on people and their pride in their community. So I think that's a, you know, it's not a real tangible piece, but it's partly what I think about when I think about building public places. And that's what this is. It's building a public place. And how does that connect with the other functions that are going on in the city? And if we can leverage those connections and make it an even more powerful conclusion, I think that's where I would lean. So. Other thoughts on this one? This was our last question slide. I think I'm going to take a few minutes. We have a few more minutes to go here, and I'm going to get everybody out of here at 8:30. And it's not on the, well, it is on the list. It is like, what are the other questions or, you know, criteria that we should be thinking about as we try to start narrowing on a recommendation? Jonathan?
Could the city come up with some scheme to have tons of employees work from home so that you could have a much smaller?
So that's can I frame that as a question? It's really about what's the future look like from a city service delivery standpoint? Is there a different model? I don't know if I can solve that here, but the world has changed since the pandemic. The work world, the service delivery world has changed. So where does that lead us into the future? So thinking ahead, is there a different solution?
Build the biggest building possible on, say, that where the town hall is today and that duplex. Make it as big as you could, and then, you know, have most of the people work from home.
The other option would be build something that's very flexible for, you know, future, you know, modification.
I think, I don't know if this question is in context of just what we talked about last slide. But I did want to ask if we're being realistic and like, let's say that the bond doesn't go through or something like that. I wonder if we should talk about like, hey, if this is all the money we have, what would it mean if, you know, what can we compromise and what can we not compromise on? Like for instance, none of this would matter if like the police station doesn't get its space or something like that. Like, I don't know if we should talk about a realistic scenario where like, hey, we should prioritize this first, something like that. Like if it's to be with you, none of this would matter for me personally if our cops don't have like or like public safety is threatened or something like that. That's something we should talk about.
Ooh, got a lot. Okay, so I'm going to go with Marianne first.
And piggyback on what Hamilton said about, you know, the future vision. One of the things that I thought about is, are we going to be updating the website? anytime soon to make it a little bit more functional for people who actually want to use, like, such as actual chatbot that could service that customer service, because we might get less walk-ins. So the future need might be driven down, people still need meeting rooms and stuff like that, but the services would be answered with technology. Okay.
Yeah, we update the website every few years, just as sure that it is updating websites. We've talked in the past about chatbots. To some success, I think, for customers. I think it's also a lot of people use our search function in that way too. A lot of people enter our site just by Googling what they want and then entering the city that way. And so we kind of waived that last time and figured it was an essential tool for customer service versus doing other things to ensure that what comes up right away on the site or how you can easily find it in search or making sure our Google search results are good. So, but yes, that's something that we do work on a lot and look at what pages people are going to most. It typically is Parks and Community Services, it's our farmers market, it's the pool. It's who's in jail. We have a log of who's in jail and people want to know. So a lot of it is the kind of customer service stuff. So we try to prioritize that on the website too.
I also just add, it's probably only a matter of time before like vendors who work with municipal clients start providing products like corporate AI chatbots where you just, I need to get this permit, it's 2 a.m. You can't talk with someone on the phone and it walks you through like this guy. So I'm imagining it's
I'm sure.
pretty close.
It's amazing what it can.
So I guess, you know, I'm retired, I see that a lot of corporations, local corporations are having, you know, return to office policies. Right? So remote work seems to be kind of on less and less. And the city may be different, but it seems like there's a lot of people starting to feel that lack of connection, right? So I think return to office, either by mandate or by choice, is happening more and more as time goes on. You see it every morning in the traffic report. So, yeah, I just wanted to do that. And the follow on, I guess, the other consideration is to be a broken record for parking, right? Parking. As if we're going to do some kind of a, you know, bond measure, master plan, then parking was also part of the community survey results that, you know, they weren't disinclined to take public transit. So parking is an issue. And if there's more parking available as part of this city campus, then it also serves the open space too. People have a place to park, to go, you know, to go to the park or any of the other places they want to visit in that area, right? And right now, and because traffic in that part of town, I know it's bad. I don't know that the city hall portion of it is going to change that much, right? Because we already have all this transit at city hall going on now. So I don't think increased traffic is going to be much of a factor. Growth in the region is going to affect that much more than what we're doing.
If you have a community, looks like, they're gonna want to-
Mostly the Africans. You know, that's
I think that's what I think that's what the survey said, mostly more be.
Well, I think the other thing too is the traffic, 60% of this has nothing to do with the city.
right.
We're the biggest off ramp in the state.
Okay, I want to get to Carolyn.
Thank you. But the great comments. I agree with all. Something else I'm thinking about, and as we formulate a recommendation or try to go in one direction or another, is timelines. We've been kind of vague with, for instance, if we buy a property, if we do Pickering, we probably have to do wetland studies, all that stuff. When I'm trying to make a decision, I'll map it out in process. What's going to take the longest? What's the shortest route to get to where I want to be? So I'd like us to have a little bit more detail with the recommendations to get us some solutions sooner rather than later. And that might help with some decision making.
Good. So Lori, I'm gonna follow up on that because I have something similar to that. There are different options, the options of construction, leasing, et cetera, and then there's phasing that has to happen. Is there any way we can, not down to the wetland study detail, but because that's, takes time, but I think big blocks. Like, is there a way we can map out, what would it generally take to go from, the beginning of a couple different scenarios to actually implementing the full solution, which whatever the solution is we recommend, and maybe maybe we're not there yet, but is it something that we could develop?
We could, there would be a little bit of fluff in there.
Oh, yeah, a lot of fluff, I'm sure.
But I would also think that if you're going to build a new city hall somewhere, that in the time that you're gonna go out for your bond campaign, a lot of that will be taken up before you even get your funding. So while we can put that together, you also have to overlay your funding process on top of that too. And I don't know what your funding process would necessarily look like, but probably well over a year to do public engagement, and making sure everything got all your I's and T's dotted in process. So we just have to keep in mind that that's also a factor in this. So yes, we can put together a development schedule for a new building on a downtown Old Town site versus a new building at Pickering, and what that time frame would look like. That's relatively easy. But it's the funding component that would drive that more than.
So maybe we're not quite there yet, but I think it's part of a strategy conversation too, that I think that would feed into what makes sense from a timing end. And if it is a recommendation to go and build something that would require a bond based on what we've heard otherwise. So how would we want to map that out from these different pieces? Okay, with Andrew and then to you, Eric.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm all about what's going to be most pragmatic and can actually be done. And I think a phased approach, 50-year thing sounds great. The reality of it is what's most urgent is the police station, which is life safety. So that's for public and our officers. That means getting City Hall out. Well, it's suboptimal, least space, probably going to be the most cost-effective option and actually able to get it done. And then as it goes, this whole plan will evolve. The senior center is, there's a lot of physical obsolescence that's almost done. Over time, then maybe the community space, evolve into that space. And, maybe a long-term plan is going after that antique shop and picking it up down the road, but this is a big bite to take all at once. And, if you guys, unless this is going to continue getting canned down the road, I think we need to map out, eating the elephant a little piece at a time.
Eric, I couldn't agree more. That was one of the things that attracts me about this campus plan, master plan, as Galen was saying, was that we do have several pieces that the city owns in that Old Town area. And creating a campus could be a matter of phasing. So, maybe we take down the senior center and make that, as you suggested, Andrew, the sort of the community spaces. And then maybe separately, in terms of financing, we address the issue of administrative offices and front desk. And maybe that happens where City Hall South and the duplexes are located. And that we, from a financing perspective, eat it one piece at a time and be able to phase that from a practical standpoint. That my gut says that makes a lot of sense.
April.
I think we're all grappling with that staging and the practical approach to it. What I'd be curious about is we cannot have what's the other path to make sure the facilities needs are taken care of imminently? Is there some sort of ripcord council can pull to help us get there, and then to afford us more time to explore some of these other financing options and get the rest of the work done?
So it's the question is, accomplish what you can within the means of that you currently have.
Yeah.
Okay, as a city. Chris, and then, Jason.
Yeah, just maybe a word of caution. The senior centers mentioned, and that is a very popular, very heavily used facility. And I'm all for looking for options, like one point we talked about the WeWork site. But that did come with a cost of recreating the WeWork services somewhere, maybe there, but there. And so with the senior center, I mean, for example, even we had bomb cyclone, what that became sort of an emergency community center, a lot of people. So if we look at that parcel, that area, we have to look at the cost of recreating that somewhere else. And currently, I mean, there's work going on there around it as part of the whole depot pedestrian park. So that one might be more costly than some of the other options.
Jason and April, then we are out of time.
Okay, I just appreciate all the comments that I just heard. I think to Andrew's point, as far as phasing, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's ultimately a recommendation. I know Toll is probably going to scream somewhat when I say this, but I think the idea is if you're really going to take care of the PD, the administrative office is probably going to have to find somewhere like a 5-year short-term lease. And there are, when all those, there are certain powers the council has, councilmatic bond, which would at least get the police taken care of while we figure out the strategy to actually go through the bond with the public, how to, obviously work with marketers and campaigners, how best to make this digestible. So again, there are some things the city can do. Ultimately, it's up to the policymakers, but yeah, I think that was just kind of it. The only thing I was going to say is surprising to me. The big thing that surprised me about the survey was just how much people truly are tied to their cars. The lack of interest in public transit was a big for me. And that might change with that. It might change the sound transit, but that light was only going to be here for 20-something years. So that's not
like
2045.
it could change. But like I said, the bigger number that concerned me was the ride along the car. It wasn't that people weren't willing to give that up. And that, like I said, I think that will inform my decision making in the next year or two, because I've never seen that type of a response from the community.
Yeah, partly could be the lack of availability and then lack of experience using transit.
It could be all those things, but it's not the salve I think some people think it's going to be when it comes in summer.
Okay, so we're at the conclusion of tonight's meeting. So good discussion, and thanks everybody for weighing in. This was helpful. We have some thinking to do about the next meeting discussion, but this last kind of round the table discussion about thinking about strategies and phasing and options for, working within the current means, et cetera, are things that we probably should kick around a little bit. So we'll try to figure out how to set that up at our next upcoming meetings. So with that, any other final comments or other business we need to deal with? All right, then we are adjourned. Sorry, 8:32, missed by 2.
They have it down, we have an Issaquah campus plan that's created, I think in the late 80s already, when we are top of it. And we've been trying to do it in phases.